This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. We come to you today with short business episodes, short private equity episodes, interviews with brilliant private equity and business leaders. I also get the chance to interview, I would say, just people of brilliant interest to myself, quite frankly. Today is one of those people. We're joined today by Kahler Paulson, and Kahler is a young, evolving entrepreneur and person and leader, starting college, someone that was referred to me to have on our podcast. Just thrilled to visit with them. We're to talk a little bit about some of the research he's done, what he's doing now, how he looks at the world, and a lot more. Kahler, can you take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. So my name is Kahler Paulson, as it was introduced. I'm an incoming freshman into University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and I will be studying architecture here. I lived in East Peoria, Illinois, so it's about 4 hours. So it's a bit of a trip. However, this summer I got the opportunity to come up preemptively and participate in an undergraduate research program that the college has. So I got the chance, along 20 other students, to work along different professors in their programs and get a feel kind of for what college research is and if I wanted to continue with that.
And talk a little bit about really two things. There's an old phrase that you're probably familiar with, but many of our audience might not be, particularly if they're close to your age. One of the old phrases is, will it play in Peoria? And somebody asks you the first question is, are you familiar with that phrase? Will it play in Peoria?
No, I'm not actually.
So that's fascinating. So will it play in Peoria was an old ad and marketing concept, branding concept. Peoria being sort of the sort of prototypical middle American town, and the concept being certain things would play well as an advertising or as a PR slogan in LA or New York. But the great question going back 20, 30, 40 years ago is, will it play in Peoria, which is thought of sort of, Midwestern and a prototypical Midwestern town. So would the middle of the country, be able to get on board with whatever the PR or marketing advertising slogan was? So that's the background for our audience and for you, is will it play in Peoria? Now, I am certain, I will bet you dollars to donuts, Kahler, that Andy Paulson knows that phrase, and I'll leave it to you to ask him whether he's familiar with that phrase, will it play in Peoria? So the second concept we've got today, talk to us about doing undergraduate research, doing research as you're incoming into college, and what does that look like? Talk to us about that a little bit.
Of course. So I guess, first of all, it was definitely a bit of a jump coming from high school, just because, there's different programs available in high school that can kind of get you ready for college. But college research is a whole another sort of topic. It can kind of vary, which is the fun part, because it means that there's a lot of opportunities available to different types of students that might find undergraduate research interesting in different ways. For example, many of the different research labs were taking place in actual laboratories. So they had to do with chemistry or physics or material testing, things where it's a lot more like data-based, and they're running trials. However, that's not all undergraduate research is. It's really just any type of research into any subject. So, for example, the one I participated in was Professor Sen's Building Landscape Cultures Field School. And basically what we did this summer, it's an ongoing project, but what we did this summer was we went out into different areas of Milwaukee, different local communities and neighborhoods, and we kind of explored both the history and the design of different gardens that they've made, and like the purpose behind them. So that was a lot more in the field work compared to some of my colleagues and peers who were in different science buildings around campus or just across the city.
Talk about the history of why people put those gardens together. For sort of the hobby or to feed themselves. Talk a little bit about the history. Where does that come from? And what were some of the things that you learned?
Yeah, of course. So basically what happens is that like early in the 1900s, as kind of these manufacturing cities started to pop up and like big businesses would move there, factories would move into different neighborhoods. And then those factories would kind of serve as like the place where people go and get jobs. So it helps a lot of people in the surrounding area, get money to feed their family or find housing nearby. However, as these different companies and factories either run out of business or they just move somewhere else, that leaves a lot of these neighborhoods suddenly like mass out of a place to work, which then kind of snowballs and spirals into a bunch of like housing losses because they can't afford to pay, or just in general, not great situations as these neighborhoods kind of fall into decline because there's not that support there. So the urban gardens come into play as people kind of reclaim these empty lots due to different houses being foreclosed or abandoned because they can't afford to live there anymore. And they take over these spaces that technically belong to the city by turning them into gardens and also as a place for community. So something that we really focused on this summer was how these community gardens not only were gardening spaces where people can get different types of plants, but also as places where people can gather and talk to each other and kind of foster that greater neighborhood sense of belonging and find a place not only to connect with nature, but with each other.
Fascinating. So in some ways, it's like the Starbucks of yesteryear, the third place, the place for people to hang, to be, to visit, to have a community. That's fascinating because I wouldn't have expected that. That's actually fascinating. And Kahler, as you start college now, and start getting going in college, and start working at it, what are you most focused on and excited about? Do you know what your major is going to be, what you're planning to study? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'm going into the field of architecture, and that was kind of what inspired me to participate in the Building Landscape Cultures Field School. What the field school does kind of varies whenever it's in session. So it's technically always ongoing, but like there's different summer sessions just based kind of around that like undergraduate research program that the school has. So I chose the field school because it seemed most acclimated to what I wanted to do. But it also, what I kind of realized is that it gave me a deeper appreciation, not only for the buildings that like I might want to make, but also just kind of urban design in general, which is also a big part of architecture in its own field that I could go further into if I wanted. So I got some practice like sketching out different layouts of like what a garden could look like, which is definitely architecture focused. But then also just in general, learning about the people that live in these spaces and how they utilize these spaces is very similar to what architects do. Looking around in different spaces that either need something built by some company or see like housing, like there's need there, or trying to kind of beautify these different areas that kind of have been struggling a little bit because they were left behind. So it's like, even though it's not necessarily at first glance, you wouldn't necessarily think it was architecture focused, in a deeper dive, looking at these gardens is kind of just an example of what architects do in the future. So I felt like that was interesting to explore.
And so I'll ask you the toughest question of the day. And again, you don't have to answer this, Kahler, if this is too complex or too hard or stresses you out too much. Okay.
Okay.
Well, let me know if you're ready. So you've got a very both diligent, rational, and creative side to you, sort of thoughts about design and architects and so forth. You've got two really bright parents. Who is the more creative of the two parents? And is that where the creative sense, the architectural sense comes from? So who's, I wouldn't say who's the smarter parent, because you can't answer that. But could you give us a link to who is the more creative parent? And you do not have to answer this. And if you answer that, you can't answer it seriously in a negative way about either your parents. You understand that, right? But give us a sense of where does the creativity come from?
Well, I think there's different types of creativity. And I think that's where I kind of get it from both of my parents, as, you can look at just like artistic creativity, the ability to like draw things on a paper, but you can also, I feel like you can consider types of ingenuity and creative thinking that doesn't necessarily have to do with like physical artistic skills or the ability to like understand 3D spaces. So I don't know if that's a bit of a cop out, but I believe that I get it from both. My dad has maybe a little bit more of like a creative thinking just because, he's a little bit of like, he's very savvy. Whereas I feel like my mom has a little bit more of an artistic side than my father probably does. So I think it's that combination where I've kind of gotten a little bit of both. I've learned from my dad and my mom, and also, many other people in my life. And that's kind of where I'm at now.
And I guess one more question. How many children are in your family?
There are 4 of us in total.
Okay, so who is the brightest of the 4 children? And again, you're not allowed to answer that, Kahler. You know that you're not allowed to answer that.
No.
Just kidding. Good.
Yeah. It's all of us.
You.
It's all of us.
Thank you. Not allowed to answer. There you go. Much better. So are you a Chicago Bears or Green Bay Packer fan?
I'll be honest, I just kind of root for whoever everybody else is rooting for. So what are you a fan of?
So I am more a Chicago Bears fan. I like, when you go to Wisconsin, you're going to hear a term called fibs. And I don't know if you've heard that term yet.
Not yet.
So this is one of the great beauties of getting to talk to our youth and younger people. When you go to Wisconsin, people that are from Wisconsin will periodically call people from Illinois what they call fibs. And you'll ask one of your Wisconsin friends, and this may date back to my generation too, Kahler, so it might not be something people say today, but fibs is, I give you the F part is the F word, so we can't say it out loud. I is the Illinois part, and B is the bastard part. And so when you get to Wisconsin, you'll have people, you'll probably at some point hear the term fibs, and it's said generally, I think generally it's meant, jokingly, not really truly, in a negative way, but just the natural poking fun of Wisconsin versus Illinois people and so forth. So you get a little bit of that, calling Illinois people fibs, but it's not really, you shouldn't worry about it because in general, and I don't mean this offensively to my Wisconsin brethren, most of them aren't bright enough to understand what they're saying anyway, so it doesn't matter. They could call us fibs, and we just understand very nicely that they really don't understand stuff, so it's all okay.
There you go. Yeah. I'm going to tell on you, by the way. I'm going to tell everybody.
It's absolutely fine. They might not understand that either, so you're okay. No, I'm totally, of course, joking. Well, I got to tell you, Kahler, it is a pleasure to visit with you. I've had a chance to work with your Andrew Paulson and Andy for 100 years, as good a leader as they come. And I would argue that your mother is just as savvy as he is. So there's, I think I've got to help you there a little bit. They're both equally savvy, both wonderful people.
Yeah, of course.
100%. And what a great pleasure for me to get to visit with today's youth, brilliant young people. Kahler, thank you for joining us today on the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. What a pleasure for me. Thank you very, very much.
And thank you. I'm honored to be here.